Lockjaw. I'm excited to be back, excited to be talking about all things combat sports, and today's a good one. Today's topic's a really good one. I'm excited to sort of break it down and talk about it. But yeah, before we get into it, just want to say I appreciate everyone that's reached out, everyone that's sent me a few things that they want to know about, or even just saying, that they're pretty hyped that I'm starting to do sort of stuff like this and content like this. I'm pretty excited about it. So, I appreciate the support. Remember, like and subscribe, and keep up to tabs with what I've got going on. But yeah, let's get into today's topic. So today's topic is basically, we're going to talk about the progression of not only mixed martial arts, but specifically the level of amateur mixed martial arts and the sort of level of the talent that's coming through compared to like when I was an amateur or coming up in the sport, which obviously we've seen such a crazy leap in the sport of MMA from its infancy to where we are now, especially with like the early days in the UFC to where we are now. It's almost night and day. It's like crazy the progression that we've seen. But obviously I've been involved in this sport for a while now, like for over a decade. So I'll start off basically sort of comparing how things have progressed from when I first got into the sport to where we are now. So basically, I started competing in MMA in 2014. Obviously that was when I was an amateur. So I started having my amateur fights. I think I had like 9 amateur fights before I went pro. And obviously back then, like without a doubt, the amateur level, has transcended when you look at these fights now. Like you look at these amateur fights that are happening now on shows like Hex, shows like Eternal. There's like such a high level talent caliber. Like these guys, these young guys, young girls that are coming through, like their level is already, so high, and their talent is already like, they're already at this ceiling that they're going to burst through before they even go to a pro level. And then you can only imagine what we're going to be able to see. But nowadays, so back then when I was an amateur, for me, for example, I came from like a wrestling background. So, didn't have any like real striking training or anything until I started sort of competing in MMA. And even then, I really didn't work on my striking until I trained. I made the move in 2018 to Brisbane, and I trained at Southside MMA under Pasha Soya, and that's when I started really sort of working on my striking as well. But up until then, I was just a wrestler. I was just a specialist that was getting by because of my wrestling. Whereas, and there's a few other people on the scene that had those sort of similar things. You had a couple of people that had like the striking backgrounds, but there was very few people that were just like, you'd consider them to be like mixed martial artists that had like a full rounded skill set in every area. That wasn't really, even then, that was starting to be a thing, but it wasn't really as common as it is now. So a lot of my fights, like I got by pretty much just on my wrestling. Like, the striking, I would just entertain the striking exchanges a little bit. But the second I saw an opportunity to close the distance and shoot, that's what I would do. And I would just outwork people. So I would just rely on my wrestling, would rely on my cardio, and I would just try and break people and outwork people. Especially my early fights, like coming from a wrestling background, I was very, I would pretty much just approach my fights like we see now from some of these guys like Khabib, Islam, some of these Dagestani guys, where I would just outwork people, take them down, break them down, and just look to do that. But then obviously, as we know, every round starts on the feet, every fight starts on the feet. So, there's going to be times where, the other person, if they're skilled in that area, they have an ability to do their best work at the start of every round. So yeah, there was a couple of times where, unfortunately, that being like a specialist or having a singular discipline to use just didn't work out, where, you copped it a bit and experienced some adversity. Whereas now, especially being at the gym where I'm at Freestyle, I'm seeing these young guys come up. Like, we've got a couple of fucking young killers that are coming up now. And the level that you're already seeing from these guys is like, it's crazy. It's levels beyond what you would have seen back then. And I will sort of maintain that some of these, a lot of these amateur guys you see now, they're looking like experienced pros or experienced veterans out there already, and they maybe got like 3-4 fights under their belt. These people have been training in everything from the get-go. They're mixed martial artists. They can strike, they can grapple, they can wrestle, they understand distance, they understand timing. You know, some of them have really high fight IQ and decision making. Like, you look at some of these amateurs, especially that are coming out of gyms like RC Freestyle, you know, places like CKB, Absolute MMA, like some of these gyms that have been around with some established fighters, established pros, established UFC caliber guys as well. You know, look at Louis Stroke Combat Academy, you look at Scrappy MMA, you look at some of these gyms, there's established pros, there's established like world-class fighters, and you're seeing that trickle-down effect happen to these amateur fighters. Like, they're coming in there, they're like 2-3 fights in their career, and they're looking like absolute weapons. Like, I maintain, and let me know what your thoughts are on this, but I maintain that a lot of these amateurs, like you see some of these amateurs that are like 4-0, 5-0, and you see the level that they're at, they would, you know, you take those guys, you go drop them into like the early days UFC, into their weight class that they're competing in, and they would smoke fucking everyone. There's a few outliers, obviously, because there's always going to be the people that are like the 1% of the 1% that stick out, but they would smoke like 98% of the people in the weight class that they fight in at that level if we did that. It's just to show you how crazy the sport's been. Obviously, there's outliers in those divisions from back in the day, like the people that we look at and we go, holy shit, they were levels ahead. And they were sort of the early adopters of being like a mixed martial artist, not being like just a specialist in the sport. You know, the GSPs, the BJ Penns, guys like that. But, you know, Matt Hughes, you know, those are sort of the names that stick out early on. But then, you know, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be specialists that still excel in the sport, and we're still seeing that now. You look at someone like Alex Pereira, you know, you look at someone like who, another sort of good example, like Pereira's the main one that sticks out at the moment, because he is like a 2-weight world champion from a kickboxing background. He was a glory 2-weight champion, and now he's fighting MMA, but really doesn't use any sort of wrestling or grappling. Like, he uses his wrestling to be defensive, stay on the feet, and does his job as a kickboxing world champion. So he's probably the beacon that I'd use for that. And there are always going to be specialists. But basically what we're seeing now is like, you're walking into gyms all around the world, all around Australia, all around New Zealand. Yeah, you're just seeing these young guys and their level and this, you know, their understanding of the sport, their understanding of like the little battles that you have to have within each discipline of the sport. Their knowledge of that is at such a high level, because if you think about it, a lot of these guys, you know, they're coming in, they're training, they're doing everything, they're being programmed as a mixed martial artist from the get-go, and then they're doing rounds with like established pros and like world-class people, you know, fairly like quickly, like almost fairly sort of instantly in a sense, and that just automatically is going to just boost up the levels. Like I sort of touched on, we got like a couple of young guys at Freestyle that are just, it blows my mind every time I sort of see them. I see them just moving around the gym, I see the work they put in, and then obviously I see them compete, and you know, it's the biggest sort of, I guess, eye-opening thing that you get from that is you're seeing how quickly people are picking things up, how quickly they're adapting, how quickly they're applying it to their game, and the levels of progression are so fast, fight to fight to fight. So I kind of, you know, I go into the gym and I'm there on a Saturday sparring, and I'll spar some of these young guys, and I'm like, you don't have that luxury of being just coming into the rounds being like, you know, I've been doing this a hot minute, you know, I can just kind of coast, because the level of skill that you have coming back at you and the sort of problem solving that you have to do is pretty, it's pretty up there. And I sort of look at it right now, like I look at it objectively, and I'm like, a lot of the time when I'm having success, or I'm, you know, controlling a round, or I'm you know, sort of dictating what's happening in a round, it's right now, it's solely based on the fact that I'm a little bit older, a little bit stronger, and a little bit bigger. But skill for skill, these guys are fucking like right up there. And you know, the second these young guys start filling out more, they pack on a bit of size, they start getting a bit more strength about them. And whereas I'm already seeing that with some of these guys, they're a problem. It's becoming like a big problem. So you're like looking at that at an amateur level. It really puts a exciting sort of it lays out an exciting path for what's ahead in the sport. Not only for the guys in my gym, I'm excited to see how their sort of careers pan out and what they do, but just for the sport in general. I mean, go flick on any show that I sort of touched on, Eternal Head. So put on any of these shows, watch the amateur fights that are on before we go to the main cards of pro fights and stuff like that, and look at the level of the fights that you're seeing. More often than not, the amateur fights are bangers. Like fight to fight to fight are just bangers because the level's so high. So we're in a really exciting place. Like I still thoroughly believe that mixed martial arts as a sport is still in an early stage. Really, it's still growing tremendously. The talent is just obviously shooting every year, just shooting through the ceiling and just getting better and better. So I'm excited. I think even if you're just like a casual fan of the sport, or you're a fan of the UFC, start tuning into these regional shows. Start tuning into these amateur fights. Watch Road to Hex. Watch these Eternal Undercards. Watch these shows where you're going to see these amateur people coming up, because before you know it, these guys are going to be established names in the pro divisions, and we're going to be seeing them on the cusp of like Contender Series and UFC call-ups. We're seeing them in the PFL, seeing them at the top level of the sport. And now's your opportunity to watch them on the local scene. Go there, pay your ticket, buy the stream, tune on Fight Pass, like watch these guys compete, because pretty soon you're going to have to fork out, $80, $90, $100 for a pay-per-view to be able to watch them, or you're gonna have to fork out like $300, $400 to go to a live show to see them compete and see them do their thing. Like the progression is going to be crazy, and the level that we're going to see in the next few years is going to be like insane. And the trickle-down effect happens from the people in the gyms, the coaching, the training partners, the pros, the people that are at a world-class level fighting in the UFC and stuff like that. But then at the same time, the guys that are at the top level of the sport and how well they're doing. Like right now, obviously, Australia is in a really good spot. We've got 2 current champions in the UFC. We've got a bunch of top level ANZAC talent that is fighting in the UFC and some of these big promotions. And then that trickle down effect is happening all the way down through the pro ranks regionally, and then all the way down to the amateur ranks. And then, you've got these guys coming into the sport. They're seeing people like Volkanovski. They're seeing people like Jack Della, as champions in the sport, and then, it lights that fire. They come into the sport, they train, they do their sessions, and they're like, I can do that. Those guys did it, I can do it. So that's exciting. So the level of MMA that we're going to see in the next few years is going to blow people's minds across the board, around the world. But specifically here in Australia, I think Australia for a long time, we kind of had a little gap between us and some of these other countries where we didn't have the opportunity to really showcase the skills or the level of the sport. And now it keeps just getting better and better and better and better and better. So pretty soon, it's not going to be a far cry to think that we'll keep having champions in multiple divisions on these top promotions and just taking over. So yeah, I guess what I really wanted to sort of cover today was just how exciting the progression of MMA is in Australia, the level of amateur MMA, and how much has changed in the sport. Like we're a far cry now from like the early UFC days where it was just no weight classes, people just came in and fought, and and then we progressed to sort of a more well-rounded mixed martial arts approach. And then you saw these guys, they would approach the sport like, when we're striking, when we're grappling, or they would just like to strike, or they would just like to grapple. And then obviously early days, we saw jiu-jitsu being such a successful discipline to use in the sport with the Gracies and some of these early guys. But then you started seeing guys like GSP who could put it all together. Now, everyone does that. Everyone can put it together. Everyone can do everything. Everyone can switch stance. Everyone can fight orthodox southpaw. They can change their distance. They can, we got people coming in that are like mixing every discipline of combat sports together, and they can do everything. And it's like an approach of, you have such an access to techniques and access to things where you flick through on Instagram, you flick through on some of these things, and you see something, you go, okay, can I add that to my game? You start drilling it, you apply it, and like that, it hits with some, especially with these young guys, like they're so talented, it just hits, and that's it, it's on. So yeah, I guess my message today, guys, is just go and watch some of these amateurs. Watch them now, appreciate them while they're fighting on the regional scene, because pretty soon they're going to be fighting overseas, they're going to be fighting on these massive cards, and you're going to have to flick out lots of dollars to be able to see them do their thing. So appreciate them while they're here, appreciate them while you have them on a regional level, and just go support fucking regional MMA, support these amateurs, and yeah, get excited about the sport, because we got big things coming. But as always, guys, I appreciate you tuning in. Like and subscribe, And yeah, keep hitting me up, DM me on Instagram, you know, get in touch, let me know what you sort of want me to cover, if there's anything you want to know about, whether it's just combat sports related, whether it's from my career, just whatever, just hit me up. But no, again, thank you everyone, and I look forward to the next episode. Peace.